Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host for today. We are talking UFC Baku, headlined by Khalil Rountree and Jamahal Hill. We're going to be breaking down four plays like we always do in the show. And listen, last weekend at UFC Atlanta, I got the shit kicked out of me. Not the greatest showing overall betting-wise. I had a great showing there at UFC 316, the event I was at, and came back with a loser. We are going to get back on track here this weekend at UFC Baku. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Already have a 4% play up. Going to be adding to that as we get closer to fight night. So lock in. We're going to be hot this summer. And with it being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Khalil Rountree and Jamahal Hill. Now, we've got Khalil. He's sitting around minus 130. On the comeback here, we've got Hill at plus 110. Now, both of these guys are coming off ugly losses, kind of like me last weekend, but some ugly losses. And, you do have Hill. He got knocked out by Yuri Prochazka. You've also got Khalil Rountree, got slapped around by Alex Pereira, then knocked out in that fourth round. Now, I do think a lot is being made by the market when it comes to Khalil's loss to Pereira, because you got Hill, who got knocked out in the first round. You got Hill, who's going to knock out in the first round. You got Khalil, who was knocked out later in the fourth round. And even with that being said, it still was kind of a fight where it was pretty one-sided overall. You got Pereira landed 127 significant strikes to 61, doubled him up on that, knocked him out. So I do think a little bit is being made of that, because that's why I do believe where the market is kind of putting Rountree at this particular point. But with that being said, you do have Hill, who did look sluggish against Yuri. I thought it was one of the, the worst performances really of him, but also the fact it was probably the best version of Yuri Prochazka we have probably seen, where this guy normally, he kind of, goofs off a little bit, does some dumb shit out there. It has his hands down, weird movements. And he pretty much just stuck to the plan, had great footwork, great head movement, kept his hands up, good footwork, just everything worked out well for him. And I think it really had Hill in a bad spot. I thought he just was not able to land anything and just kind of was off. Even with that being said, it still was 97-81 for Yuri. You did see Hill, he was landing, but did end up getting knocked out in that fight. Now, also in this spot on Saturday, I do believe that Hill does have multiple advantages here. And, going back, watching tape, I think there's multiple reasons. And the first one being the fact that you've got Hill, who's going to have the volume and the pace advantage. I think it's pretty clear that he will have this in this fight. I think it's going to be massive for him when you're looking at it, because consistently is pushing out that high volume, pushing out that pace, utilizing his high level boxing, utilizing his range. And also the fact that he just, not only does he just push out the volume, but he lands double the amount of significant strikes that Khalil lands over in 1 minute per minute. So you've got Hill landing 7 significant strikes per minute, while Rountree lands 3.5 per minute. And that's a problem. And not only is that a big problem, because it's also the fact that you've got Rountree, who has a big negative striking differential. He gets hit a lot more than he lands on his own. And I think a guy like Hill, who's going to be able to push out that volume, be the better boxer, is going to find a ton of success here. So I do think that's a huge problem. And now you also add in that not only does Rountree, he's got low volume, he's got the low pace, but also the fact that, he still has the weaker cardio between these two. And that's a huge thing here also, that he just, doesn't push out the pace, the volume, but the cardio can really deteriorate quickly. Early, I think he's going to be explosive. We've seen it. He pushes out some big hooks overall, but I think the straight shots here landed down the middle are going to work for Hill. I think that, Khalil is not really built for 5 rounds overall. Hill, we have seen him do it, even against Glover Teixeira. We've seen him go deeper into fights here. And I think he's going to land the more impactful shots overall. And then lastly, I think you got to give Hill the strength of schedule when you're looking at, who they have faced. And even with, Rountree, I mean, he goes out there, beats, Chris Dawkins, who 0-4 run and then cut from the UFC. He beats Anthony Smith, who was on a week notice and on a 1-4 run. And all of a sudden, he's facing Alex Pereira for a title. So I just think that this is going to be a great bounce back spot here for Jamahal Hill. So I'm taking Jamahal Hill, especially at this plus money number at plus 110. We're taking Hill in the main event. Next fight here we're going to be talking about is going to be Myktybek Orolbai. He is minus 163 in the comeback. We've got Tofiz Musayev. He is plus 130. 30. Now, this is a fight here where you've got striker versus grappler matchup here. You've got the relentless grappling of Orolbai. He's going to come forward. He's going to try to push that pace. He's going to be relentless with it. We know what we're getting from that guy, and that's what he's going to do, rinse and repeat. Now, on the other side here, you've got Tafik. Excuse me. He is he's going to be the harder hitter between these two, and that's what he's going to be looking to do. He's going to be looking to swing heavy, land those big shots, and that's where he's going to look to find success. Now, there are a couple of red flags here on the Tofik side here. And I think the first thing being the fact that he's 35 making his UFC debut. I think that is a bad sign to me overall. I mean, there's been years ago, people have talked about Tofik, said, hey, this guy, has ability. This guy could be in the UFC. And he just UFC never signed him for whatever reason it is. And more he's getting signed right now for this fight because they're in his backyard on home soil. But also the fact that he's been in, Bellator, he's been in Ryzen, even his last 2 wins in Ryzen, not the most impressive fighters that he is facing, even at the end of his career. He beat a guy, I'll just give the records, 17-8. And the other guy is 19-11-4. So not the most impressive overall when you're looking at that. But also the other issue that I see on the Tafik side is the fact that he hasn't fought since November of 2023. So you've got, him, maybe slightly under 2 years. He has not stepped in the cage. He is 35 and, he's making his UFC debut. I think these are tough things here that you've got a tough setup for him in this spot. And stylistically speaking, I think this is just a bad matchup again for Tafik. And I think it's because it's going to be the wrestling. I think that Orolbai has that just relentless pace. It's going to be the toughest wrestler he has faced by a mile. And I think that Orolbai is going to absolutely take advantage of that and really push that pace. And you've also got the fact that, Tafik is a guy that doesn't throw punches in combinations. He's a guy that's going to throw one big shot. He's going to look to try to land that. If you can land it and hurt you, good, great. But if not, he's going to, step back and look for that perfect big shot again. And that's just, I don't think, going to work. These lapses in action, I think, will go very well for Orolbai to shoot takedowns, to look for that control time, to find opportunities to be on top position. And also, you've got to look at the fact that, that really the only win condition here for Tafik is a knockout. I don't see him being the minute winner here. I don't see him winning rounds by really any metric, really. I don't see him outlanding Orolbai, outpositioning Orolbai. So I think it's really a knockout or bust for him. But now the other issue for Tafik is the fact that Orolbai's never been finished in his professional career. This guy could take a bat to the face and he's still going to come forward. And we saw that against Rebecki, where Rebecki was just, putting the beats on him, and still Orolbai is shooting takedowns, coming forward. Many guys would not be able to keep going. He was able to. I give him credit on that. Even in a losing effort, he can take punishment, keep coming forward. But I think in this matchup on Saturday, I think really works out well for him. I think the mix of durability, cardio, wrestling, I think is going to be way too much here for Tafik, especially at this point in his career. I think that Orolbai is going to get those takedowns. And I think at this number, even at minus 163, I think there's a lot of value. I think Orolbai could look minus 300 when this fight is over. So I'm taking Myktybek Orolbai at minus 163. Next fight here we're going to talk about is going to be Mohammed Naimov. He is minus 320. On the comeback here, we've got Bogdan Grad. He is plus 235. Now, this right now here, the money is coming in on Naimov here. We are seeing him becoming a wider and wider favorite. And I get it. The guy's got some power. The guy's got the ability to knock people out. He's definitely a physically strong guy overall. And there are those things that he does do, but especially what he really likes to do is cheat as much as he can. He don't give a shit what the ref is going to be saying or doing. This guy is going to be cheating, grabbing the fence, eye poking, do whatever he needs to do to get the victory. Now, you kind of look at really what Naimov does well, besides for cheating, and really what he does is, he's got some strength, and that I think is really what makes him a great fight, or a good fighter, I should say, not great, but a good fighter. And I think that some of the things that Grad does, I think Grad can kind of nullify some of those things and counter them very well. But you look at even the wins, for Naimov over this win streak here, and it's not that impressive. I'm just not that impressed overall. He goes out there, he beats Jamie Malarkey, and, it's Jamie Malarkey. But, even the Nathaniel Wood fight, which is a fight where I think very highly of Nathaniel Wood, but that was a fight where there was maybe 3 fouls. Things weren't called. It was highly favoring Naimov, where just ref didn't really give a shit. But even with that, it was still only 50-48 on significant strikes. Very, very close. It was the takedowns that really made the difference there for Naimov. He got 4 takedowns, and that really secured the victory. After that, he fought Eric Silva. Eric Silva broke his ankle, in the first 40 seconds. So that doesn't really, mean much at all. And then the other one here, the last fight, he fought Khan Offley, who I think is awful. And even in that fight, where I think he should have just really put it on Offley, you look at it, it was 32-31 on significant strikes, very, very low volume. He was able to get 2 takedowns, get the victory, but I thought that was just a bad performance for him and really should have been one. He put a stamp on that fight. Now, you look at, Naimov, his margins of winning are very small. And now you've got a guy that's, over a 3-1 favorite and a guy who doesn't really separate himself from opponents. You just don't see it much at all. And he has relied on some cheating as well that has helped him kind of get to this situation here. And Naimov, again, he is strong. He does have that strength, but I do think that Grad is just as strong as him and can nullify some of that. So if he's looking for takedowns or any of those kinds of things, I think Grad is going to really be able to kind of be offensive with it, look for his own takedowns, create scrambles, get back to his feet, keep Naimov working. And I don't think that Naimov is going to be able to really defensive wrestle as well as I think that he's going to be, as some people may think. I think that you're going to see Grad find a lot of success, get control time, land some big impactful shots here overall. And then you got, and Grad also, I think that he's, going to crash the pocket, going to be aggressive, going to be forward pressure, and he's going to push the volume. So you got a guy that can defensive wrestle, can offensive wrestle, will push the volume, will push the pace. I think that can make this fight way closer than this line indicates. So I do like Bogdan Grad at this plus money number at plus 235. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be Junyong Park. He is minus 195 in the comeback. We've got Ismail Nairdiev. He is plus 160. Now, I understand why Park is a favorite here because you've got, Ismail, who this is his second stint in the UFC. He came in the UFC a couple of years ago, went 2-2. They cut him. He goes outside of the organization. I think he was in Brave FC, some regional scene stuff. And, he went 4-3 over his last 7 fights, lost some regional fights, not the greatest look. But, first you got to look at the fact that, Ismail was probably like 23, maybe 24, or maybe even 22, if I'm doing the math right here. But somewhere in there, he was in the early 20s in the UFC and still was getting wins. He was 2-2, but still getting wins. And then, he's losing on the regional scene, but some of the wins that Park has had, these guys should probably be on the regional scene. You're talking about like Dennis Tululiam, who is just terrible. Joseph Holm, who is not good at all. I mean, Tefan the Don, not good. I mean, these are just not high-level fighters at all. So it's not like Park has faced these high-level guys. And Park's 34 years old now. It's not like, Park's on a 5-1 run, and they're now giving him a guy who's his second fight back in the UFC. Like, I think it's just weird bookings for him because I don't think that he's that good. I don't think Park is that good. But you look at, 5-1 run, 3 of those victories were split decision victories, very, very close. Some of them he outright should have lost. So it's just a kind of a weird situation. But again, his win margins are very short. He needs to, be able to positionally win, get control time. And he's not that dangerous. He's not putting a stamp on anything. It's very rare where he's getting submission victory. Sure, he's got some, but it's just not, he's a grinder, going to keep you up against the fence. That's what he's going to look to do over this fight. Well, now you've got, Ismail, who's now, 28 years old, I think making improvements at this point here. And I think even his recent fight coming in on short notice against Bruno Silva goes out there, gets the victory. And what I liked about it the most was the fact he shot 13 takedowns. I thought that is showing growth where he's primarily a striker. He is now showing he's bringing takedowns into this game. He's mixing it up a little bit more here. And I think that can help him overall, really rounding out his skill set, rounding out his game. And that's where I think that this is going to be a difference maker because you did see Park where recently Park against Andre Muniz, who Muniz is just another guy that just has never really materialized in the UFC, but is a guy that, does have grappling, but normally doesn't really get takedowns very well. He was able to go out there and get 11 takedowns against Park. 11. That triples the most takedowns that Andre Muniz has had in one fight in his UFC career, and he has had 11 UFC fights. So I think the opportunity here is there for Ismail to look to offensive wrestle, not worry about just what Park's doing, but offensive wrestle himself and look to push that type of pace. But I do think that he is the far better striker, better, quicker hand speed, better footwork. I think there's multiple things that he does do compared to Park on the feet. I think he's going to outland him. I think he's a harder hitter. I think there's a lot that he does do here. So if he can kind of mix in those takedowns, keep Park off balance, I think the openings for shots will be there for him. And especially here at the plus money number at plus 160, I think this line should be closer. I would probably put Park around like a minus 120. Probably somewhere around there, a pick 'em price tag in this fight here, but I do like Ismail, especially at this plus 160 number, and I think he gets the job done. So there you have it for my plays for UFC Baku. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. I do have that 4% play sitting there right now, ready to cash this Saturday. We'll be adding to it as we get closer to fight night, and I have a massive card coming for UFC 317 the following weekend. Gonna have a 5%. Love the spots that I'm already looking at right now and looking at the line movement as well. So let's get this job done this Saturday and let's cash.